Welcome to the 85th episode of the Hail Married podcast. I'm Atovs, and I'm joined by my husband, the Tobes. We're back to recap our bounce-back win over Houston Christian. Let's get started. What were your overall thoughts on the game?
Well, the goal was to execute in all phases, and I felt like that's exactly what UTSA did. It wasn't like really pretty. There wasn't like these big plays and just raining some bombs on the HCU defense. Instead, it was just more of execute the run game, execute in the pass game, and just be a little more methodical. Yeah. And I thought that's exactly what was good for UTSA, because especially coming off of a big-time opponent in Texas, you just needed to just continue to execute and build upon this. After having such a mistake-filled Kennesaw State game, and I won't say mistake-filled, but there was issues in the offensive line, and just disaster in San Marcos, and then to go to UT, you just needed to start getting back into a rhythm of this is who we really are, and it was going to take one of these games just to kind of continue building.
Yeah, I thought that this would look a little bit more like we saw in the first quarter of Kennesaw, though, where we really were in an offensive rhythm, but it just seemed like it was really hard to kind of get in that rhythm.
Yeah.
Particularly in the first half, because it seemed like if somebody wasn't taking a timeout, if there wasn't a TV timeout, there was like a Houston Christian defender's body on the field. Those
How
poor
many
kids.
guys did they lose? Because it felt like, you're right, it felt like just about, especially early in the game, I would say maybe later in the first quarter, it just felt like there was just another player going down. It just over and over, they were just dropping like flies.
Yeah, I felt really bad for him because they still have a long FCS schedule to play, and they're going to need some of those kids to come back. So hopefully they weren't hurt too badly. But man, they were getting injured, and that was just really kind of impeding some of our drives, because you had this great play, stop, wait. Great play, stop, wait. You just couldn't quite get into that same sort of offensive rhythm that I was expecting to see.
It was just, like I said, start, stop, and it would have been nice to kind of be able to just have this whole drive where you felt like, okay, they're executing, and they're moving the pile, they're doing what they need to do, but it just, at least in the first half, it just didn't feel like that. In the second half, it felt a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that we were going to get that splashy, like I said before, that splashy offensive game that I think we were hoping for. And I'll reiterate, that was great, because to me, I saw this quote, and it was actually a hashtag from Coach Pittman, the UTSA soccer coach, where he was imploring his team, do simple better. And it felt like, at least in this game for the UTSA football team, it had to have resonated, even though Coach Pittman was telling it to his soccer team. It felt like that was a good hashtag for this HCU game, because it felt like they did some of the simple things better on the field. The run blocking, some of the things on defense that they needed to work on. It was those little things that, while not perfect, and I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, every single phase of the game was perfect.
Yeah, no, and we'll talk about that more.
Yeah, I felt like at the very least there was full effort, there was mental toughness, there was physical toughness, and I feel much better coming out of this game than I think if we had just kind of thrown a few 60-yard bombs and just kind of felt like, well, we didn't get to see the offense really move. We just kind of felt like we handed it off twice, and then we hit on a big pass play. Those still would have been nice. I would still would have liked, maybe another big play or two. But overall, I was fine with just punishing for HCU.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say, though, is that we shouldn't say, oh, we're back, or we're so back after this game. We all saw, those of us in the stadium, there were some students in the student section that were flashing that we're so back.
Good for them for, supporting the team and being excited, especially after 2 really down weeks. But no, we're not quite there, and we're not even I don't even say we're not close yet
Yeah,
to
I
being
think
back. If whatever being back means.
yeah.
How did you feel about the NIL QR code though? Because that flashed a few times on some of the plays, and you know, I'm laughing because I know I told you a couple times it'd be great, like if you could go up there and do a little NIL and like donate, but then like if they had a negative play, like you take away some of that money. Just
Or like you just give them a bucket of money at the beginning. All right, every player has $100. Like after this play, you can take some money away. You can add some more. Like
not the NIL that I think that UTSA would like, but
no,
it made us chuckle though, right? Like,
yeah. It would be interesting because I would love to know how it actually did at the end of the day. Did people actually use the
true,
QR code
true.
or did they just flash it up there and not really get any response from it? So, yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I do like the fact that they're thinking outside of the box and trying to do something a little bit different. I'm just not sure if that hit just yet.
Yeah, in all seriousness, that it's a nice idea, and let's hope that it does help benefit some of these athletic students, whether not just football, but maybe they can flash it up during basketball or something. I don't know. I'm just throwing the things out there because unfortunately for like soccer, they don't have a video board, so it's
Yeah.
not like you can flash it up there. And I don't think there's even a video board for softball or baseball. So I think there's obviously UTSA has a ways to go in some of their facilities, but just thinking holistically for all the athletics
Yeah.
programs, it would be cool if we could see more of that. But you ready to start kind of breaking down some of these some of the phases of UTSA's football team?
Let's do it.
All right, let's go to the offense. Balanced game, right? I mean, I would say 269 yards rushing, 267 yards passing. Yard wise, it's balanced, but I
Hmm.
felt like there was certainly they just were gonna go and rush up the gut and just dare Houston Christian to stop the run.
Yeah, and like I had said in the preview, we saw Tarleton rush for over 200 yards against Houston Christian. So I felt like this was going to be the game where we were going to be able to do that ourselves, and indeed we could.
They were their defense had some weird looks at times,
Hmm.
and it was funny because I thought that it would really throw off Owen. Instead, I felt like Owen just ate it up,
Yeah,
and I don't really understand why there wasn't any more adjustments from that Houston Christian defense, but I mean, it's not like I'm an HCU fan, so I don't care. I mean, like if they're not making adjustments, then we'll just keep handing it off. We'll keep, doing what we need to do to get this offense going. But speaking of Owen, I thought he had a good game. I think he's still struggling to get the ball out a little quicker. He seems to be getting it out slower, and I think starting off in the Kennesaw game, I felt like the game seemed slow to him, but now. And I don't know if it's because of whatever happened with the offensive line. And I would imagine that was probably the main culprit. It just feels like he sometimes is gun shy and
yeah,
he's not anticipating the throws he should make right away.
yeah,
Unlike, like I said, and to your point, at the beginning of that Kennesaw game where it seemed like everything was just flowing.
yeah. It seems like that the fact that the offensive line had some breakdowns has really kind of gotten to him mentally, and maybe he's questioning himself. And hopefully, after this game, we see him kind of work through that. I mean, it might just, be one of those mental things where he's got to build that trust with the offensive line and with his
Yeah.
blockers,
Yeah.
and you know, um, feel more confident in himself as well. I mean, you saw him rolling out of the pocket a lot, which is good and bad, but hopefully that helped him gain a little bit more confidence.
I mean, and the thing we have to harp on too is experience.
Yeah.
We're so used to seeing what Frank Harris would do, but he had so many games under his belt. And, I'm going to say it for the upteenth time, early in Frank's career, he looked a lot like what Owen does right now. The game was still pretty fast for him. He was having problems at times getting it to slow down. He made some really bad mistakes on throws, and we haven't seen that from Owen.
Yeah.
But we also haven't really seen that ball fly out early enough with Owen in order to give the wide receivers a chance to make some some plays. Speaking about the wide receivers, though, it just feels like they're still not quite getting as open or making the plays yet that we would like to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still definitely some opportunities from them, although it was good to see, the explosive play with Willie McCoy.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
we did get to see, Jamel Hardy get his first career touchdown. So it's not like there weren't great plays, but there were also a couple of times where, you kind of saw Owen like trying to figure out who he could throw it to.
right.
And then, some connections where even with Eddie Lee, that touchdown to Sparkman, okay, it was not the greatest pass, or the attempted touchdown to Sparkman, but you also needed JJ to like use his body a little bit more to try to he let that defender just rip it out of his hands.
That was a tough one because I hate the fade route in the end zone. Like I think it's an overused play, and I feel like we remember the good times with UTSA when they hit on those.
Like
but
pretty much every time JT Clark went up for one.
Yeah, yeah, it was JT that did it, but I never heard, like, it's not like it's been recreated by any other UTSA wide receiver. I say that, and I know that we've had Josh and Zakari had those moments too, but it just feel like that's not where I'd like to see this UTSA offense continue to try to cash in on. I think that there's just other ways to get these guys moving, and we saw it early on in Kennesaw State. Now let's keep building and seeing what these wide receivers can do. But like I said, I think a lot of it has to do also with Owen. Get that ball out and let the wide receivers lead them and let the wide receivers make some plays. And I think as they kind of continue to build that chemistry, I think we're going to get there and we'll see this offense moving a little bit better. Now, let's talk a little bit about the offensive line. I think the offensive line was good.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say, again, they're perfect, but I think they had better moments in this game. And, of course, it's an FCS opponent, so I'm not going to, like, overstate anything.
Yeah.
But I think they did a good job in terms of, obviously, run blocking. I mean, 269 yards.
Yeah.
You wanted 200 yards rushing.
Absolutely,
And
yeah.
you got it because of the fact that our offensive line paved the road for these running backs.
Yeah, and they had to do it with, once again, another change in the starting lineup.
Yeah. I don't know what to make of the offensive line at this point. I feel like they keep building, and just like any of the other positions, and I don't know what Traylor's doing. And I say this, tongue in cheek, because I feel like I'm as bewildered as he is. He talks about how do all these other teams stay healthy? And like, I don't know, man, but for whatever reason, your teams just can't. And I think it's just as frustrating for us as fans to see him trot out another offensive line. But overall, again, good game from all these guys. I guess I'm happy that Venley didn't have to play.
Yeah.
Obviously he played quite a bit against Texas, but as you had mentioned earlier, he was out of the starting lineup. We got Walker Beatty instead, and again, they did fine. I'm not going to say that they were completely spectacular because it's an FCS opponent, but I also not going to hammer them for doing something terrible. I mean, other than that, I mean, is there anything else that caught your eye with the offense?
No, not necessarily. I mean, again, it was good to see the run game going. I think they're going to continue to improve the communication on the offensive line. You just hope at some point in time we get to a point where we can have the same starting lineup 2 or 3 games in a row,
Yeah. All right, let's go to special teams. Here was an area where I think got interesting, but first let's start out with the punting. It's been maligned by a lot of UTSA fans, and I'm not really sure why, because I've gone back and looked, and Kale actually gets an average of 40.5 yards in this contest. Went back to the 4th game that Lucas Dean had in his career. His was in the 30s, in the mid 30s. Well, actually, no, it was 38 yards or something like that. So we're seeing the same results, but again, this is similar to Owen and Frank Harris. And, I just don't want to beat this too much, but, the fact of the matter is that the punting's improving. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that our offense is actually moving. So it's
Yeah.
not like we're asking Kale to punt like 12 times like
Right.
we were tasking him to do in San Marcos. So an improvement. And so we like to celebrate the improvements. Another improvement, we got a field goal block.
Yeah. I mean, that was the first time since 2018 when Tariq Woolen blocked a field goal against Marshall.
Reek.
Yeah. Really great to see Jamori Robinson, block that field goal. We'll talk about him a lot in the defensive section as well. But, he gets the block. Denver Harris recovers. Again, it's been a long time since we've seen that occur.
And good for your boy Zach Brown. He can say that they did something good on special teams, right?
Now, looking at it from the HCU side, I mean, they had their punter doing double duty as punter and kicker, so he was probably like, he gets out there, he makes the first field goal, then they get the penalty, moves it back, he has to try it again, and that's when it gets blocked. I'm sure he was like, my team is not helping me out, man. Like, I'm trying to do double duty here, and
it felt very UTSA though.
Yeah.
Even if it was on HCU side, it's looked very UTSA-ish.
Yeah, and also, another good thing, we got to see Allen kick a field goal and make it.
But let's tell the story of, we knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
We talked about Chase Allen as if there was something wrong physically, but if you listen to the broadcast, they brought out something different.
Yeah, they said that Coach Traylor had Chase Allen talk to a sports psychologist the week leading up to the game. And, again, we knew something was off with him, and I wasn't sure if it was because, maybe he was overcompensating for an injury or something else was going on. But, a lot of times in sports, I mean, that's just a reality, right? You have this mental block. We can go back and talk about the Olympics and the twisties with Simone Biles. But, a lot of the game of football is mental toughness. It's a mental game, and maybe there is something else going on, but it was good that he was able to speak with a sports psychologist and then see an improvement. Hopefully that continues. They also rotated Chase and Tate on extra points.
Yeah.
In the stadium, the announcers couldn't figure that out. I mean, Chase Allen got credit for every single one, even though it was very clear that it was not him. It was Tate kicking. But the announcers, if you're watching at home, picked up on that right away.
So, I mean, I think it becomes interesting with Coach Traylor and the fact that he was kind of trying to me, throw Cale Hogan under the bus about, like, how he held the ball and things like that. When really we saw exactly what, like, even Greg Lucas saw from the press box, which was Chase Allen doesn't seem right.
Yeah, something seems off.
Yeah, it didn't look like the hold was off. It didn't look like that was a bad snap. Nothing. It looked like he just had the yips, and it sounds like it doesn't sound like he completely has the yips. But
well, even Greg said watching him in practice that he made some long field goals and then he struggled in a game. So that kind of lends credence to there being something off mentally, like where you're able to do it in practice and connect, and then when you get to the game scenario,
yeah,
something's just, off and you're not trusting yourself.
I mean, for a lot of players, whatever sport it is, you can do great in practice, but then when the lights come on and everybody's watching, things just get very different for you. So let's hope Chase just continues to improve. If not, I'm actually confident in Tate Sandell. I feel like, if Chase is struggling a little bit, Tate Sandell can come in. He's got a great leg, and I think he just needs a chance. I know that you've kind of mentioned before that maybe pulling double duty might be a little tough, but to me, if we need a clutch kick, I think Tate would be able to get it done.
Yeah. Now we just got to figure out how to handle those kick returns again.
HCU was, for some reason, like, actually I would say some of the kicks that other opponents may go ahead and just take a knee on, HCU didn't care. They would just take it out, and they hit on one. So I'm not too concerned on that one. I mean, if it happened repeatedly throughout the game, then I would be much more concerned. Mm-hmm. But it felt like HCU came in saying, we're going to return every single one. If it's not half, more than halfway into the end zone, we're going to take it out, and they did. So, they're just ruining Tate's touchback stats, but
Yeah.
whatever. All right, let's get to the defense. You were talking about Jamori Robinson. Jamori Robinson had himself a game.
He did. I mean, created a turnover. Interestingly, this was the 14th consecutive game that UTSA had a takeaway. Again, when you hear that stat, I was kind of surprised. Like, I didn't realize it had been that many games in a row that we'd had a takeaway. But such is the truth.
Yeah.
The truth is the truth.
Well, it's one of those things that the defense never really gets too much credit for.
Yeah.
And I would say the other part to it is if you're not taking advantage of it, then
I
of
just
those
felt
turnovers.
like we talked about last season, the defense like needing to get turnovers.
We always talk about it. Like it just sometimes it feels
And
like we're not
apparently they
getting
were
them.
doing it, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this was I think early last season they just weren't doing it.
Yeah.
And they just kind of struggled, but it happens. It happens. Overall, I thought they played well too. I don't think there was some breakdowns. We allowed a touchdown to Houston
I know we
Christian.
allowed one touchdown. It was just unforgivable that they allowed them to score.
Well, I think the worst part is that there was so many penalties that led to that score.
Yeah.
You had the big kickoff return, and then you have a couple of big penalties that helped HCU down the field.
We had 2 face mask penalties, one on special teams, one on the defense. So, when you're handing them 30 yards, I mean, it's inevitable they were going to get some points out of that.
Absolutely. And I'll also say this, look, I know that we're harping on those, mistakes, but that's what's going to be crucial for UTSA to clean up, because especially in closer games in the AAC, which I'm anticipating much closer games this season, you'd imagine that those are going to be the turning points in some of these games, is that you'll get this little mistake and other teams will just take big advantage of this, and you got to watch out for that. So,
and I mean, to their credit, most of the game was played by Eli Brookhandler, and he really hadn't played hardly any minutes for HCU this season. So I'm sure they probably didn't have a whole lot of film on him. They were expecting to see
Cutter Stewart,
yeah, and we saw him in the first couple of drives, and then Eli came in, and he pretty much played the rest of the game. Outside of, a couple of drives in the fourth quarter. So
it felt like a very Jeff Traylor move where he'll say, we're going to start this guy, and then all of a sudden, bring in.
Yeah, and the announcers had said that HCU had made a comment that they haven't decided who their quarterback is yet. But, just given the amount of time that Cutter Stewart had played, it seemed like he was starting to shore up that starting position.
Well, it didn't matter who was taking the snaps because UTSA defense took care of them.
Yeah.
Constantly pressuring. They definitely caused a lot of chaos for that HCU offense. HCU at times made some plays, which you expect. I mean, this isn't going to be a situation where HCU wasn't going to cross the 50.
Sure.
We'd love for that to happen, but HCU is actually much better than that. And while not a great FCS team, they were still good enough to move the ball. But overall, you feel like I saw a lot of young guys out there on defense early in the game, which, again, leads to a few communication issues.
Sure.
But that's okay, because again, if you're going to start mixing in some of these younger guys early in the game, whether it's because of injury to a starter or just because you want to bring in some rotation, especially against an FCS opponent, I think you're going to be okay. And honestly, they were. I didn't feel like there was really any issues I had overall from this UTSA defense.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, we got sacks from Joe Evans, Owen Pee-wee, Jamori Robinson, Triplet,
just an all-around.
Yeah, it was an all-around great game.
Defensive effort. And I'm glad to see that they're at this point and, hopefully, again, another stepping stone to continue to improve, and that's all we can ask at this point. And I think this is going to be a stout enough defense that, especially in the AAC, where we'll see teams more of our equal or lesser talent to play us, and hopefully we just continue to perform.
So now that we're 4 games into the season, how would you categorize, or what would you say is the state of the team right now?
That's a good question. I would say offensively, it's much more chaotic than I thought it would be. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I feel, at least, that Coach Traylor and Coach Burke are still continuing to value the system over tweaking the offense to fit their offensive players' skills. And that doesn't mean that they had, like, I'm asking for like an overhaul of the offense, but there are things that Owen does differently than Frank Harris. That's obvious. Like we can't debate that. Like that is a fact.
Owen is not going to scramble for 85 yards.
Right. This is not who he's going to be. But I do think that there's some things that we can tweak for the skill players and for Owen to at least get much more comfortable in the offense. And to me, I struggle with the offense still. I don't really know that they found what they want to be. And I think just the problems in the offensive line, if you don't have a run game, it's very difficult for a young quarterback to really get comfortable, because you can't really do any play action. You don't have the opportunity to throw some, deeper passes. Again, hopefully during the AAC, we were able to see some of what we kind of got to see against ACU, but I don't know. Like, there's still question marks. I think a lot of question marks, and it's inexperience too. I mean, there's a lot of pieces that are just kind of coming together, and it's easy to blame the offensive line, but I feel like there's still more to this. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's, I guess, surprised me about this team is that we haven't necessarily seen the same mental toughness that we've seen in years past. And I know we criticized last year kind of that aspect of it as well. What I'd like to see with this team is that they come in and they're prepared, they play tough, they kind of have that mental mindset of the 2021 team. I see that as the peak of Coach Traylor's culture. That team came into some really tough circumstances, and they just seemed to be very focused. And even if they went down 21 points, you felt like they could get into a position where they could come back. And they seemed to find a way to play better than the sum of their parts. I don't think that 2021 team was our 100% most talented team ever, but they played up a level. And so I think that's something that this team is really struggling with, is how do you get to that level of mental toughness and focus? And, I think that's something that they're going to have to figure out pretty quickly if they're going to be successful in conference and or make any kind of run.
Yeah, and hopefully, we see some of these injuries, get healed over the next week or two. After ECU, we've got coming up, we've got the bye week. So hopefully we don't suffer anything major at ECU. Because I think if we do, then that throws a lot more chaos into this. And I'm not anticipating or forecasting any sort of major injuries. I'm just saying,
Sure.
any more hits to the depth, and this could get
dicey.
Yeah, incredibly dicey if it wasn't dicey already. Okay, with that, let's pivot and let's get to our East Carolina preview. You want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, our fans will remember last year when East Carolina came to UTSA, their offense, was one that definitely struggled.
Was there an offense?
So there have been quite a few changes in the offseason, starting with an entirely new offensive staff and several new offensive key players. in the offseason, they went out and got an offensive coordinator, John David Baker from Ole Miss, and really kind of charged him with putting together this explosive, fast-moving offense. They wanted something similar to what you have seen in the past from Ole Miss. And so you're going to see, a very different look at their offense. You're going to see them trying to play really fast, up-tempo, and trying to set up the run so that they can have these big, explosive plays. It was interesting preseason. Mike Houston had said that their offense was starting to show some moxie and swagger, and that was kind of what their offensive coordinator had brought to the team. That in the offseason, typically the defense would just beat the tar out of their offense, and they always kind of seem sort of beaten down because ECU's always been known for having, such a stout defense, and their offense has struggled. So he was really proud and excited about the swagger that he was starting to see from his offense.
Well, it felt like it was a lot of coach speak because watching East Carolina play is rough on offense still, because I feel like they're trying to go fast, but for no reason.
Yeah.
There's no purpose to their offense going that fast, because even in trying to find those mismatches, they don't have the skill set for that. They don't have the type of quarterback that Ole Miss would have.
Right.
They don't have the wide receivers or skill players that Ole Miss would have. And so when you look at it, last year they averaged, against FBS opponents only, they averaged 14.9 points per game. This season, against FBS opponents only, they're averaging 21. So about a touchdown.
Yeah.
They added a touchdown. But it's still a very rough offense to watch, because
it is.
They've given up a couple of big leads over the last couple games. And it's been interesting because, we try to watch a lot of our future opponents and just kind of message each other or talk to each other about this. We're just looking at each other like, I still don't understand East Carolina. Like, I don't understand the UTSA offense sometimes and what they're building, but at least I know these are the staples and this is what they're going to do. With East Carolina, I don't understand.
Yeah, I think they really just didn't have any kind of offensive identity. And, the head coach was like, well, I had an explosive one at JMU years ago, so let's just try that. Let's just try to go fast. But the problem is they're also going fast and they're hitting these 3 and outs, and then their defense is getting tired.
Yeah.
And I think it's having this negative effect on the defense.
Oh, it absolutely is, yes.
And then the one game where they actually won against an FBS opponent, and they seemed to play well, was the ODU game, and they actually played slower. So I don't know why then after that, when they played App State and Liberty, they tried to go up-tempo again.
Well, they jumped out to leads, but then, to your point, they start bogging down, and you start wondering, what's the purpose of this? Why are you doing this and hampering your team? So, anyway, they brought in some new players. Specifically, I think you want to talk about their new quarterback, Jake Garcia.
Yeah, Jake Garcia, not to be confused with Mason Garcia, who was there last year. Completely different player.
Not related. He kind of has an interesting backstory. I'll tell you the backstory, and then I'll let you can kind of go into his stats. But okay.
In high school, he was committed to USC, and his senior year was 2020, so the COVID year. And he lives in California at this time. California says, hey, we're not going to have football. So he and his parents start looking for other opportunities for him to get to play his senior year in high school. They find a school in Georgia where he can be the starting quarterback. But in Georgia, they require that all moves like that have to have both parents. They need to be considered bona fide so that the athlete is eligible to play. Well, his mom was still working. His dad had retired from the police department. So mom and dad get legally separated so that he and his dad can move to Georgia so he can play his senior year in high school in Georgia. After that, he ends up decommitting from USC, goes to Miami, plays there a couple of years, then moves to Missouri last year. He didn't play at all. Now he's at ECU. The interesting thing, though, in all of this is, mom and dad have this legal separation. There's an article I find that says, hey, they're going to get back together, after this year apart. But all of Jake's bios since then list him with only list his mother as his parent. So it says like son of Yvonne Garcia. Like dad's not mentioned anywhere. So I don't know if they just left dad in Georgia or like what happened. Sort of an interesting path to take to, really try to propel your child into a starting quarterback position. And I'm not sure that ECU is really the landing spot they had in mind when they went through all of this.
Sure. Especially starting out some of those big schools. So
yeah, and all that to say, like you mentioned before, I mean, he's a good quarterback. I don't know that he's the most accurate quarterback. He's averaging right now about 62% completion at ECU. He's 86 for 138, 1,021 yards, 5 passing touchdowns, but he has 9 interceptions. And prior to the Liberty game, he was leading in interceptions, which is not a category you want your starting quarterback of your new cool explosive offensive system to be leading a stat in.
well, there you go. I mean, therein the problem is that your trigger guy has problems turning the ball over. And like you said, if you're going so fast to the point that it's causing him to turn the ball over, then you've chosen the wrong offensive system.
Right.
And again, it's like Mike Houston's grasping at straws. Whatever it is, the reason why he went to it, this offense might be running all over his defense, but you got to take off the ECU glasses and try to figure out, like, maybe it's your defense got a problem.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about they do have a problem. But let's talk about the wide receivers. Winston Wright Jr., also a kick returner. He's a transfer from Florida State and West Virginia. He's got 18 receptions, 207 yards, 1 touchdown, 11.5 average. Look, if your trigger man struggles, your wide receivers are going to struggle. So it doesn't matter that this guy is from Florida State or West Virginia. The problem is that he needs a trigger man, and his trigger man's a little off. They also brought in Anthony Smith, a senior, 6'3" transfer from NC State. He's got 15 receptions for 212 yards, 1 touchdown. But you see, again, it doesn't seem like they're really getting big plays. It just seems like they're reduced to sort of more of possession receivers, where it's we'll make the catch and then we'll get tackled right away, and that's about it. And that really, when you look at that offense, that's kind of what it's like. It's just sort of we kind of move it, but we're going fast, so it's really cool.
Yeah. One of the returners who has started to be more of a factor is Chase Sowell. He's a redshirt sophomore. Kind of interesting connection to UTSA and Owen is that he was at Colorado when Owen was at Colorado. And then Owen transfers to UTSA. Chase transfers to East Carolina. He's a guy from Texas, from Humble. So I think it'll be interesting to have, 2 former teammates on opposite sides.
Yeah. He's got 11 receptions for 149 yards. So got 3 weapons outside for Jake Garcia. We'll see how he goes with it. But let's go to their backfield. Rajay Harris has been there a while. 63 carries for 289 yards. He's got a 4.6 average, 3 touchdowns. This is the guy that is having a much better year because of this offense. I think it's probably the one guy that that can say, I've improved because of this offense. But I read a few articles on East Carolina, and they were really hyping up Harris. Here's the deal. I think if UTSA is going to focus on stopping the run, it's going to be stopping Harris here.
Yeah.
And I think, it's going to be important that they do, because he has had a couple of fumbles, but let's see what happens. I mean, most importantly is let's not let him just get on a roll and just start really cutting through our defense. We hold him, we should be all right. Last guy to bring up is tight end Casey Kelly, transferred from Ole Miss. The offense coordinator brought him over. He's got 12 receptions, 110 yards, and 1 touchdown. Again, 9.2 average. It's like almost a first down each catch. But, again, some of these I think are bigger averages because they played FCS Norfolk State. So, they were able to rack up some stats. Kind of like, UTSA did last week, but still, just something to look at here. Let's get to their defense. It is a stout defense. They're really good against the run. Stop me if you heard that before from UTSA, right? Like it's kind of like looking in the mirror. They held ODU and App State to less than 100 yards rushing, but then they played Liberty. The Liberty game, I think, is going to be an anomaly, and I say that because they were delayed for a few hours, and that game didn't get started until late on the East Coast this past weekend. So they were well past midnight when that game ended. So certainly a tough situation for this ECU
I'm sure
team.
There was a lot of fatigue, whether it was from the offense stalling or whether it was from the fact that it was just 5-6 hours after they thought they were going to finish the game.
Right. This year they allowed an average of 24.5 points per game, in 2023. This year they're allowing 23.3. I'm only giving you stats on FBS teams, not giving you stats including the FCS. Obviously, UTSA's stats would be worse if I just gave you those. So, take it however you want. But they've trimmed a point off. But I don't know that it's necessarily helped them too much. They're 2-2. They're working on things. They do a good job of creating turnovers. A lot of it has to do with the fact that they're good at just getting interceptions and punching the ball out to create the fumbles. I'm really more concerned about that defensive line. They've got some really good players along there that could disrupt our offensive line. But let's talk about some of the key players.
You have Gavin Gibson, who is a junior cornerback, transferred in from Maryland. He has 2 interceptions on the season, one in App State, one in Norfolk, 19 tackles and 3.5 tackles for loss. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, for UTSA, ECU lost one of their best cornerbacks in Siobhan Ravel. He is going to be out for the rest of the season with an ACL tear, and that really is a huge loss for their defense. On the linebacker side, they've got Mike Edwards, who is their senior linebacker. He's kind of their leader on the defense. He has 20 tackles, 6 solo tackles, half a sack. But it really seems like Zakai Barker, who is a sophomore linebacker, is kind of the one who's emerging as a leader, and you'll hear his name quite a bit. 30 tackles on the season, 9 solo tackles, and 5 tackles for loss.
Quite the squad they have on defense. It's a good defense. Let's talk about their special teams.
Yeah, the one thing you'll definitely hear if you're watching this at home is that their punter, Luke Larson, is the oldest player in the FBS at 32. Huh. Now, there is another player in FBS right now who is the same age, well, almost the same age. He's a month younger than Luke. There's a gentleman who's the kicker at Colorado State. So apparently it's the year to be 32 and playing on special teams, I guess. But their punter is definitely very talented. But again, you'll hear quite a bit. They like to talk about the fact that he's the oldest guy in the FBS.
Gotcha.
Their field goal kicker, Andrew Conrad's been a little inconsistent this year. He's a junior. He's 5 of 7 on field goals for the season and 10 of 12 on extra points. And hasn't really been kind of a rhyme or reason for, the types of field goals he's missed. I mean, he's missed in the 20s. He's missed longer field goals. He's missed extra points. So, I think he's kind of having that inconsistent season similar to what UTSA sees.
Gotcha. All right, let's go to keys to victory. On offense, this offensive line needs to give Owen time in the passing game. One of the things that I've seen is that App State and Liberty have taken advantage of this ECU defense, as good as it is, through the air. Yeah, they'll stop the run, but boy, you can carve them up through the air, and carve up they did. Mm-hmm. It's going to be tough, though. I mean, you're asking a redshirt sophomore quarterback, and still count them on two fingers, I think, in terms of starts to win a game passing. So, but I think it's going to be needed if UTSA wants to win this game. Defensively, I think they need to create turnovers early on ECU's drives. Jake Garcia has had a lot of problems turning the ball over. So has the rest of this team. So I really believe that if the defense is able to create some turnovers, create some short fields for Owen, and we take advantage, this could be a positive sign for the UTSA faithful. All right, you want to give the Hail Mary predictions?
This is going to be a dogfight. Like I mentioned, I'm not really impressed with Jake Garcia, but their defense, like you said, is stout. I believe that our offense is more talented, but given our offensive struggles against quality opponents, I expect this to be a difficult game. We'll need our defense to be dialed in and take advantage of those turnovers we just talked about. If we're dialed in, if we play clean, limit our MAs, this game will be close. It will give me many, many, many high heart alerts, particularly since we are traveling and will be there in person to watch this game. I'm going to go with my heart over my head in this prediction. Give me UTSA in a low-scoring barn burner, 24-21.
All right. Well, I agree that this is going to be a dogfight because each team can kind of look back in the mirror and see themselves. Because you look at both teams and they're very similar. I was concerned about this game back in the spring, and I changed my mind before the season and called this a win. Look, I'm not impressed with East Carolina's quarterbacks either. Jake Garcia, it's just, I don't think he's it. And I don't think that's really going to help East Carolina get this offense rolling this season. I do, though, feel that UTSA is just not going to be able to create enough turnovers to stifle this ECU offense. I also feel that ECU's D line is going to get the better of UTSA's O line. So I'm left with not much hope and field level views this weekend. I'm hoping I'm wrong, but as of now, I'll take ECU 23-21 over UTSA.
Whew. Before we go, let's talk about UTSA soccer and a team who was successful at beating East Carolina.
Yep. Our UTSA soccer team went to Greenville. Huge road win, 2-0 over ECU, a good AAC squad. We had goals from Tyler Coker, a very nice goal. An assist was assisted by Jordan Walker, and then Sasha Dade, assist by Tyler Coker and Riley Lowe on that. Both of them, their second goal on the season. So big win for them. The win got UTSA to 1-1 in AAC play. I felt like UTSA played really loose and they were confident. As I talked about when it comes to what Coach Pittman was saying, do simple better. They did. They didn't look phased at all. They looked like they had no pressure. And I loved it. I felt like they played one of the more fluid games this season. East Carolina, on the other hand, felt like they were really pressing over and over and over again. I mean, East Carolina outshoots UTSA 19-6, but only 3 of East Carolina's shots were actually on goal. UTSA had 2 shots on goal, and they hit both of them. That Sasha Dade goal, by the way, it's going to be the easiest goal she'll ever face. As soon as she kind of turned to shoot, that East Carolina goalie was so upset about Sasha kind of knocking down one of the defenders that she did not cover the near side post. And Sasha, you might as well, if you're not going to do that, just give Sasha the goal. There probably should have been a foul call on Sasha on that play, but hey, you know what? It was in Greenville. It wasn't called, so we'll take it, you know? So anyway, it was also great to see Sabrina Hillier. She made her return in this game. She played about 14 minutes. Apparently had a hamstring injury that hampered the beginning of her season. And, hamstring injuries, David Amador on the football team has a hamstring injury. Sabrina was out essentially from August until here late September. Mm-hmm. So hamstring injuries are tough because you just can't get out there right away and really get going again. So I know we don't have a ton of time to review just this one game because there's so much that we could break down, but I got to say there was some great work from the entire team, but I just want to call out Jordan Walker, just played really well up top, really holding the ball. Cam Kloza starting to become one of my favorites because she's a central defender. The captain, Olivia Alvarez, had a really good game. Zoe May, really underrated addition. I've said it before, and I really think that she's one of the most underrated additions that Coach Pittman brought on to this team. She has played well all year. I think she's one of the few players that has consistently showed up for every single game. Riley Lowe, I thought, played well. The transfer from Charleston State. And, of course, can't leave out Jasmine Kessler. I thought she had a really good game in goal there in Greenville. Now, we go to this past Sunday, Abilene Christian. Not as great a game, I think. Luli McFarland got us on the board early, but ACU came back shortly to tie that game up. And the game ended up 1-1. After the game, Coach Pittman felt the team overlooked ACU and didn't follow the game plan. So he said that's what led to the tie, and they got what they deserved. So, very emotional from Coach Pittman there at the very end.
Yeah.
I did feel that they were much more tentative in their actions than in Greenville. They did hold out Sophie Mora, and they kind of like limited some minutes for some of their veterans. For a lot of time, they really went away from Olivia Alvarez, and I didn't understand why, because Olivia is one of the top playmakers on this UTSA team. Yet Abilene Christian didn't do anything to take her away. We did it to ourselves. We just didn't look sharp. We looked like we were going through motions, and there was just, like I said, they were so tentative at times. It just weren't sure about what to do, and it was just lack of communication. Now, they got into some of this one-touch passing near the end of the game, and they looked really good. They looked sharp. I mean, they started really putting the pressure on Abilene Christian, but by that point, it's just too late. It's just you should have gotten your motor going. So that's going to be one that they're going to look back on. In the end, it doesn't mean anything. It would have been nice to notch the goal or notch the win, but it's conference which you're playing towards. So next up is a huge game. I think they're still number 15. They're going to Memphis, playing number 15 there at Thursday, September 26th at 7 p.m. on ESPN Plus, and then return home next Sunday, the 29th at 1 p.m. versus Rice, both on ESPN Plus, as I said. It should be fun to watch.
All right, I guess we need to talk about the big conference realignment news that came out today.
Sure.
Well, we got our answer to will we, won't we, Pac-12. The announcement came out that UTSA, Memphis, Tulane, and South Florida are committed and staying with the American.
I don't think either one of us ever had the feeling when we had come across President Amy and Dr. Campos that they were completely set on joining the Pac-12.
No.
It felt like they were skeptical. It felt like, yeah, we'll listen, but we'll have to see what we hear. But one thing I think we've both learned from Taylor Amy and Dr. Campos is they both do their due diligence. Mm-hmm. They're very thoughtful, and they know exactly what kind of actions they want to take. So I never felt like this was going to be a slam dunk either way. I felt like it was going to be more of a, if everything falls right for the Pac-12, then we will go ahead and make that decision to go. But I never felt like that was just that slam dunk.
Yeah, and I think, Chris Vanini pointed something out on his post on X that I thought was pretty critical, and that's that the American Conference schools mentioned in their statement outstanding linear and direct-to-consumer national media partners at the top of their statement. I mean, the ESPN deal was America's best leverage. He said security and good G5 money, the Pac-12 could only pitch hypotheticals. And I think that's part of what we talked about, with this being different than maybe the Pac-12 of the past. You're, asking these teams to make a leap of faith to come to the Pac-12, and then you'll be able to get some kind of deal with a network or streaming or whatever, but they didn't have real numbers to talk about. And then ultimately they didn't have or weren't willing to give the money from their war chest to pay for all of these exit fees. So, if you're looking at it from the perspective of UTSA and you're already, operating on this lean $50 million budget or whatever it is, and you're relying heavily on the money we're getting from the AAC from TV revenue, it's hard to walk away from guaranteed money and then pay an exit fee to go to an unknown. It would be different, if the Pac-12 had said guaranteed X, $10 million or whatever, the number was that they said they might be able to get. But, it's like if you're an employee and you have a base salary right now of $50,000, but you're also carrying, $20,000 in debt, and somebody says, hey, I can offer you this job and you're going to make $150,000, but only 35 of it is guaranteed salary. Everything else comes in bonus and incentives that you might make.
Yeah.
You're looking at it like, well, but I have a guarantee of 50 now and I'm going to go to a guarantee of 30 or 35. I may not make that additional money. That's kind of how you have to think about it from UTSA. Like, they didn't have this big pot of gold that I think everybody thought the Pac-12 could offer.
Well, I think where the Pac-12 really missed is the fact that if they really wanted the schools they wanted, then they had to put up the money for those exit fees. And if they're not going to do that, then your hypotheticals can just stay right there where they at. These schools had no other choice than to say no thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
We're fine where we're at, because honestly, you do have ESPN, which really is, I mean, it's huge, and it's been huge for us to see not just football, but the other Olympic sports that we see, and be able to actually just go into ESPN Plus and check them out. Like
right.
that we didn't have that before in Conference USA. We hadn't had before at all. So this is so big for us, and hopefully it's a big step forward for UTSA to stay at the American and continue improving there.
Yeah, and now that we know that we're staying with the American, let's talk about some of the scores from last week. Memphis lost to Navy. For most people, this was a bit of a surprise, but since you like to refer to Memphis as a Corolla or whatever your
I mean, it's
whatever your comparison was at the beginning of the season, you didn't seem to be as surprised that Memphis lost to Navy.
Not at all. I mean, Navy and Army are tough to play, and Memphis, while they beat Florida State last week, that's the life of the G5. I mean, you look at the G5 teams, and you see Northern Illinois go into South Bend, beat Notre Dame, and then they lose at home to Buffalo. I mean, there's the like highs and lows of G5 teams. And, as much as I want to see UTSA beat like a Texas in Austin, I could see them doing that and then coming home and then pooping the bed and losing to like Texas State or losing to like some other team. And you're like, it's not even a very good Rice team, right? And we lost to them. Like, that's just the way it is. And with Memphis, it just seems like that's just a habit with them. They just do it repeatedly. Well,
we said going into the season, or at least I said going into the season, that this was Memphis's conference title to win or lose. And, now that they have one loss against a conference opponent, they've certainly opened the door for Tulane, South Florida. And who knows, if UTSA can put it together and run the table, maybe UTSA as well.
Well, you also have to put in Navy and Army in there, because
sure.
Navy and Army, if they continue on this roll, they
are leading the conference right now. Yes. Speaking of Army, they beat Rice 37-14.
Oh, put the fork in Mike Bloomgren already. I mean,
yeah.
There's a guy I know that I follow that is a big Rice supporter. He is out on Bloomgren, and to me, that's the death knell for Mike Bloomgren. I mean, Rice just needs to end it and just find somebody. But I don't think they care enough about sports, so
probably not.
Yeah.
Tulane beat Louisiana 41-33, and South Florida lost to number 8 Miami 15-50. But again, losing that margin to Miami, that's not really indicative of South Florida not being a good team. They certainly still look like they have made a step up from last year, and they're going to be a contender in conference play.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're going to be dangerous, but so I'm glad we don't play them. Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to make some noise, and I think it's going to get interesting as the weeks start going by, just to see how the Americans start shaping up.
All right, well, that wraps it up for us on the Hail Married podcast. Thanks for joining us. I'm Atovs.
I'm the Tovs.
We'll be back next week to recap our trip to East Carolina.
Birds up.